Defence League was started by a couple of young men, one of whom objected strongly to the heckling and booing which took place when his brother's coffin was returned to England. Of course he was angry. Been angry with my brother. Suggest you would as well. Quite righteous anger. What happens? He's reeled in. The English Defence League has now become an arm of the British National Party, taken over by their activists, by their strategists, and it's being used. And people's righteous anger in some cases, like that young man I just related to you, is being perverted. And make no mistake, just as high a price will be paid by ordinary, uneducated, white working class kids out there, just as high a price will be paid as will be paid by the minorities whom they victimise. Because as sure as God made little apples, they're going to wind up in the neck, criminalised, with their lives ruined, their views distorted, and life not worth living for. Ruined. That's what's going to happen. These people are not the friend of the white working classes, as they pretend. And you've only to look at history. Take a look at Nazi Germany and what happened to the brown shirts. They projected Hitler and the Nazis into power, a militant group of young, white, working class Germans. And then they were slaughtered also, including the leader, Ernst Röhm. Slaughtered also when Hitler got to power. That is the nature of fascism. The core that cannot and will not be changed. It's a philosophy motivated by hatred. It's a philosophy propelled by violence. It's a counsel of despair. The BNP admitted after the last election that they hadn't done as well as they hoped. They were enormously disappointed. Disappointed! They got over 1 million votes. They got twice as many votes as the Green Party, who ended up with an MP. Thanks to the vagaries of our electoral system. Over 1 million people voted for the Nazis in this country 6 months or so ago. Can you believe this? This is a country which sacrificed the flower of its youth in my lifetime in the fight against fascism. This is a philosophy that watched 6 million people herded to their death with less dignity than cattle. And 1 million of our fellow countrymen voted for these people 6 months ago. 1 million. Think about that. Most of you here, and I'm not being condescending, it's just a statistical fact, most of you here are too young to remember. You've got parents, ask them. You've got lecturers, ask them. Had I said 25 years ago, within the next quarter century, my friends, you will have 50 or more Nazis elected to public office in this country. And you'll have 2 Nazis elected to the European Parliament, between them representing most of the north of England. What do you think they'd have said, your parents? I'll tell you what they would have said. Not as individuals, of course, but their generation. I'll tell you what they would have said. Because they said it to me. Alarmist! This is England. That'll never happen here. They said it to me because I did predict it. And I don't claim to have any crystal ball. Predicted it on the basis of the experience that I've had. And that's what they said. Well, yes, very informative, very entertaining, Mr. Hill, but a bit alarmist. People from all sorts of backgrounds, Jews, Asians, black people, and of course our own English people. Almost to a man. That was their response. Damn it, it's happened, hasn't it? It's happened. And I'll tell you something else that's happened as well. It has moved the whole of the political centre in the direction in which they wanted it to move. That's what it's done. It's moved the whole debate on subjects like immigration. And don't imagine that I'm some sort of nutty lefty who thinks the gates should be thrown open and the whole of Somalia ought to be allowed to settle in London, you know. I'm not. That matters, of course. There's got to be some restrictions. I'm no nutcase. But I am saying that the nature of the debate has been moved sharply to the right. We've got leaders of the Labour Party, prominent people in the Labour Party, like Jack Straw and like Ed Miller, saying things that they wouldn't have dreamed of saying 10 years ago. And saying them in public. I don't know how many of you saw, if any, I don't know how many of you saw Jack Straw on Newsnight with Nick Griffin. The ignorance is absolutely frightening. This, for heaven's sake, is a cabinet minister. I'll tell you exactly what he said. Griffin is the spiritual descendant of Oswald Mosley and his kind. Talk about ignorance is bliss. He hasn't got a bloody clue. Oswald Mosley was a pussycat in comparison to this lot. He's nothing to do with Oswald Mosley. A very brief history lesson, I'll tell you what happened. Oswald Mosley formed the British Union of Fascists. The British Union of Fascists more or less fell apart at the outbreak of the Second World War. And some statisticians say that on a percentage basis, more members of the British Union of Fascists than any other political movement joined the army to fight Germany. None of that's true or not. Some statisticians do say that. Oswald Mosley grew old with the Union movement. He went to prison, he came out, he refounded his party under a slightly different name. The party grew old, Mosley died, the party died. Simple as that. But when he was at his height, in the 1930s, Mosley had a lieutenant. This lieutenant was a veterinary surgeon called Arnold Lees. He lived in Notting Hill. Civil War broke out because Lees accused Mosley of being a kosher fascist. Lees went to prison in the 1930s for issuing a leaflet which demanded specifically the gassing of Jews. Gassing as a method of elimination was actually suggested in the first instance not by Adolf Hitler, not by any German or Italian or Japanese or anything else. It was suggested by Arnold Lees in the 1930s. He went to prison for 6 months. Civil war broke out between Lees's faction and Mosley's larger faction within the British Union of Fascists.